So Super Rugby Round 11 Saturday games are in the bag. A couple of upsets and one very close game. One which was a bit of a stinker. But yeah, results are all in. So start with the first game. In something of an upset, the Reds have taken down the high-flying Lions 27 points to 22 over in Brisbane. So tries to JP Smith, Timu Paengamosa and George Smith. You'll notice not a single back amongst those players. And for the Lions, Malcolm Marks got 2 and Schoeman got 2 from the bench. So it is another kind of interesting result for the Lions because, well, I mean, just in terms of the game itself, the Reds came out pretty fired up and they scored really early on. And as the Lions kind of came back into this game, they would just blow it. I mean, that's kind of the story of this game, and if you're going to put it in a nutshell, is the Reds took the chances that they had, and then the Lions just managed to not quite be there in terms of their execution. Their execution was pretty bad throughout the game. The scrums, which I was so looking forward to, you know, were pretty even affairs for most of the game, and the resets weren't like as bad as one of the other games in this round. But yes, like I said, Reds take their chances. Lions' execution is poor. The Red scrum did get a few rewards at some times. The Lions were being penalised. At one point when the Reds were quite on top, the penalty count was 9-1. So the Lions had been penalised 9 times to 1. Now, I always start to get a bit uncomfortable when it gets that different in terms of the penalty count, because I never believe, well, generally, that any one team is really being that bad and the other team is being so, you know, law-abiding, I guess. So yeah, it was a bit awkward, especially given it was an Aussie referee. But I mean, as a neutral watching the game, I mean, there were a few lineouts that I thought that's not very straight, or a couple of passes that seemed to drift a bit forward, but I wasn't really too worried about much. And the penalty count, to be fair, did even out to be at the end of the game 12-9. So the Lions had a few more penalties, but it was fairly kind of even, and the score evened out as well. Yeah, the Lions came back and put some pressure on. They scored a flurry of late tries. They got themselves within a bonus point, so I guess if nothing else, they take something away from the game. But of their tour, I think, and the commentators alluded to it as well, that this was perhaps their easy game on the tour, and it's the one that they've gone ahead and just dropped the ball big time. Like, after such a good performance against the Waratahs last week, they've just gone ahead and put in a bit of a shocker. To be fair, the Reds' defence held at key moments. Like, those guys stepped up, and it was really cool to see them wearing their socks of their clubs or their high schools, because there was a big crowd there. It seemed to be big, and because apparently there was no club rugby on in Queensland, so everyone was getting out to the game and taking their families along. And what a great week to do it when you have a big team coming to town and you get the win. So yeah, they really seemed to be fired up for it, and it was good to see from them. But I mean, if you look at the stats at the end of the game, the Lions had more run meters, more possession, more territory, but just too many knock-ons, too many mistakes, too many penalties, and it wasn't enough to get them over the line at the end. So, yeah, you can't give a team kind of, what was it, 24 points, 27-point lead to chase down. I mean, in the second half, the Reds only scored 3 points, but it still wasn't enough for the Lions. So, it's a massive boost for the Reds because they were pretty much written off before this one, and they were on a really poor run of form. Hamish Stewart, decent kind of starting debut. Needs to probably kick a bit better from hand, but he'll get better, and he showed a bit of potential, especially with that one little step that he did. No Higginbotham, and they get another win. Somebody commented a long time ago that the Reds never win when Higginbotham's playing, so it's an interesting one to watch. For the Lions, they just continue their struggles against the lesser teams. I mean, sure, they got beaten by the Crusaders, but the other teams they've been beaten by, you look at things like the Blues, They got really pushed by the Sunwolves. Now they've been beaten by the Reds. They got beaten by the Jaguares before they were on a good run of form when they were playing pretty poorly. So there's something up with the Lions and not being able to put kind of lesser teams to the sword. They seem to kind of maybe drop their level and play at the level of the opposition. So when they're playing the big guns, they fire themselves up. But against the lesser teams, doesn't seem to be so much the case. So something that they need to fix, and it just puts a bit more pressure on their tour of New Zealand, to kind of get a result over there. They were probably helped a bit by the fact that the Bulls didn't manage to win. So that gap's still there, but I mean the Jaguares got to win, so there is still a bit of pressure on, even though the gap's pretty massive. The Rebels have got a bye coming up, and the Lions go away to the Canes. So it gets tougher, but like I said, if the Lions are going to do what their normal thing is, they'll lift their game and really put some pressure on a pretty good Hurricanes team. So yeah, big upset, and a good game to watch. Kind of all round, that one. Even though there was a bit of a shower, it threatened to be ruined by the weather. It didn't end up happening. Speaking of the weather, the next game, the Blues have gone down to the Jaguares, 20 points to 13 at Eden Park. So tries to Manu and Duffy for the Blues, Crevi, Boffelli, who can't keep out of the tries recently, and Lozana for the Jaguares. It's hard to say how entertaining this match was, because it was really a miserable night. The weather looked to be atrocious. So you can tell when you can see that much rain on the camera that the weather there must be so much worse. So I didn't think it was that bad in terms of kind of the usual wet weather rugby you would expect. I never sat there thinking, I mean, it might be because I'm invested in the game and that I'm a Blues supporter, but I wasn't sitting there thinking that this is just an atrocious watch because of the weather. That was just me anyway. But yeah, it was a pretty miserable night. The Blues kind of gave away a lot of early penalties, and Akira Ioane was yellow carded pretty early on. That's when Crevi got their maul try. But to be fair, Manu scored his try during the yellow card. So the yellow card didn't end up being a factor. It was a 5-5 scoreline after the yellow card. The kicks were probably the main thing that were being affected by the weather. Neither guy was kicking very well off the tee, given the wind and the rain. Both sides were so poor on the restart in this game. Like they would score points and then just stuff it up from the restart and put themselves under lots of pressure. So that was definitely something that the coaches were going to be not that happy with, but again, they could be the weather. Jaguares, penalties in the second half seemed to be the best kind of way to get up the field, to be fair, is to piggyback your way up the field. The Blues gave away 5 in a row at one point, which is just it's just hard to get any continuity going when you're constantly being pushed backwards by the whistle. Not that I'm saying the ref wasn't doing it fairly, I'm just saying it's a thing. The Jaguares scrum was getting so much better over time, and by the end of this game, which was the story of a few games this weekend actually, one scrum just being totally dominant. The Jaguares scrum this season has not been a real powerhouse. Made the Blues look pretty silly, just monstering the Blues, and it was lucky that they didn't give away a try at just right on half time, because it went through to about 47 minutes and there was no try. So the Blues gave away 5 penalties in a row, probably lucky not to give another yellow card away, and managed to hold on at halftime. So halftime score, Blues going with a slight lead, 13-5. But second half, every time the Jaguares kind of exerted scrum pressure to get within striking distance, they were just giving away turnovers and penalties, and you were wondering, are they going to be able to do this? Is it pressure? Is it the weather? It was hard to know, but they had all the chances, and there was just nothing from the Blues in the second half. They weren't. It's just happened. It's happened too many times for the Blues this season where they've just gone through, and it can be a 20-minute period, it can be a 40-minute period. They just don't really show up, and they had no answer for what the Jaguares were doing. The Jaguares, I wrote a note, just the Jaguares want it more. every time there's a 50-50, it was going the Jaguares' way because they wanted to win. They had something to play for. There were a messy last 10 minutes, and the Blues really needed to step it up. But knock-ons, line-outs stolen, just lazy play. And yeah, overall the game had 24 penalties, which was pretty ugly. So yeah, man, credit to Jaguares. You could see by the end of the game, they just wanted to get the victory. They got it. They were pretty overjoyed to get it. I don't know what to say about this one because I was trying to look at it like knowing that the Blues season's over and doesn't matter, and that in the greater scheme of things, this away victory is pretty good. It's good for the Jaguares. I think most Super Rugby fans would like to see them make the playoffs. Maybe not if you're in a playoff position at the moment and you're worried the Jaguares are going to overtake you, but I think it would be good for Super Rugby for the Jaguares to get a playoff spot. So yeah, I was pretty resigned to defeat pretty early on in this one, so I wasn't too upset. And with the way the Blues played, they didn't really deserve to win it. They didn't want to win it. So back to the drawing board for them. Nothing seems to be going their way. They haven't won at home yet, and we're already halfway through the season. Big win for the Jaguares, pushes them forward in the conference. It's 3 wins on the trot. First one in New Zealand, so yeah, great result for them. Kudos to them, and you could definitely see that the motivation was there where it was lacking on the Blues side. The Blues go away to the Waratahs, so you've got to wonder if this is going to be a real chance for the Waratahs to break that Australia-New Zealand kind of duck, because yeah, no Aussie team's beaten the Kiwi team for ages, but the Blues look really terrible. The Waratahs look pretty bad in their defeat to the Lions, but they've had the bye to work on it, so it might be a good time to play the Blues. But knowing the Blues, if people start to write them off and the Blues go in as a big underdog, they might just go ahead and get a win, because they were 8-point favourites for this one for some reason. Like, usually I look at the bookies things and go, yep, you guys are pretty smart, you know what you're doing, you guys make money from doing this. So yeah, but Blues by 8 was a bit beyond me. Pretty rubbish. The Jaguares go down to Hamilton to play the Chiefs. So at least it's only a short trip down the road to Hamilton. There's not a lot of having to travel around New Zealand. But yeah, that'll be a different prospect playing the Chiefs next week. So we'll see how they go. Either way, they've got 3 out of 4 wins on their tour. So it's more than most teams can say this season. Next game. Wow. The Brumbies and the Crusaders. This one was a really poor watch. Like, after seeing the Jaguares go into Auckland and win, even though it wasn't a classic game, at least it was a good result. And you could see that the players had some passion about it. I get tired of people saying Argentinian guys in passion. It's used so often, but I'm just saying. They were really happy to get that win. The Reds one was a big upset, so that was a great result. This one was just a pretty poor watch all round. The story of this game was knock-ons, scrum resets, and I hate to think what the kind of ball in play time was for this game, like how much time the ball was actively being played, but it was not very long. It was a pretty atrocious watch. There's not been many games this season where I've really been wanting to do something else, but this was one of those games. The Brumbies scored early on, and then it was pretty much all the Crusaders. Brumbies gave away a yellow card, which you don't need to do against the Crusaders. That's always a pretty bad... It's hard enough to play 15 on 15. During the yellow card, Mataele comes on because Dag's injured, and scores 2 tries. So they get 14 points to 0 during the yellow card, which kind of becomes a key point later on in this game. Yeah, the Brumbies managed to hold out from there and turn down a couple of threes themselves. They did kick 1, but unable to really put a whole lot of pressure on. In the second half, the Brumbies really managed to turn the stats around, because they were under the pump in that first half, but they managed to get a heap of territory, a heap of possession. Scott Barrett got a yellow card. And then the Brumbies went ahead and lost the line out. 5 metres up from the Crusaders line. And then the Crusaders knocked it on, so the Crusaders gave them a second chance. And then, because they were on a warning, which was weird. Usually, if a team's on a warning and the guy gets a yellow card, the warning meter kind of resets to 0. But not this game. So the Crusaders infringed again as the Brumbies were attacking. So a second yellow card. Crotty. So Brumbies were 13 men on 15 on 13 for like 8 minutes and scored no points. Like, it was bad. It was really bad. It was so poorly managed. Like, if you watch the Reds and the Rebels play in like week 2, they had the same thing. Higginbotham got a red card and then there was another yellow card. And for about 3 minutes, maybe less, the Rebels looked like they didn't know what to do with 2 men over. And then Guinea kind of just pulled them by the scruff of the neck and was like, no, this is how we play. And he ended up getting a couple of try assists. They scored, I don't remember how many points, but they scored enough points in that kind of 2-man over window to make it like, yeah, that's how you play against a team which has got 2 fewer people on the field. The Brumbies were just dumb. Like, Spate went off and just ran by himself into 2 defenders when they had 2 men over. So how did they manage to be outnumbered? They kicked the ball. Like, Hawera kicked it when they had 2 men over. You don't need to kick it. You got 2 men over. You got space. Just pass through the hands. There's going to be space because you have more people on the field. It was bad. So bad. They needed somebody to take them by the scruff of the neck and just calm it down and just do the simple things because they don't have as many people on the field. It's not real rocket science. Credit to the Crusaders, but the Brumbies were giving it to them. Like, it was painful to watch. There were no points in the second half at all. I mean, you can't blame the Crusaders too much for that, for a part of it, because they were a man down for about, 12 minutes, 2 men down for about 8 of that. So, still, it's not like many teams can keep the Crusaders to no points in a half. So I guess, if nothing else, that is a slight bright side. But, yeah, for the Crusaders, they didn't execute like we know they can. They'll be a bit concerned that Dag went off. Crotty passed the concussion test, so that's kind of fortunate because we don't want to see him getting injured. Matsaela just looks the business every time he gets the ball, so he should probably start. He seems to have earned it. The only thing is the Crusaders didn't get a bonus point in this one. They had it to fight for at the end. They needed one more try. Not able to do it. The Brumbies not able to get within bonus point territory themselves, so neither team's going to be real happy with this one. Brumbies were real poor in the first half, impressed a bit in the second half with their territory and possession, but just no finishing. No offloads, like very seldom would they offload. Like, you need to do that every now and again just to, I don't know, not be predictable. Still couldn't score with 2 yellow cards, whereas the Crusaders, with 1 yellow card on the Brumbies side, managed to get 14 points. That is the difference. Brumbies have got a bye. They need to sit down and think about what they've done, because that is poor. And the Crusaders go away to the Rebels. I believe they are staying in Australia for the period. So, yeah, not a great watch. I guess interesting for its own reasons, but not really entertaining that much. And the last one, which was really entertaining, and John Mitchell said it was going to be, and it held its own. So the Bulls lose it at the death, 29-28 to the Highlanders. So Bulls tries to Pollard, Jenkins, Creel, and they also got a penalty try. Highlanders, Aaron Smith and Fletcher Smith both score, and a few penalties from the Buta Sopwang as well, including the one right at the end to win it. So the Highlanders struck really early in this one, and it looked a bit ominous very briefly, but the Bulls were never on the back foot really in this game. So the Bulls had a lot of early scrum dominance. It's another week where there was kind of a lopsided battle at the scrums, and that was causing a few penalties. But the Highlanders were just so good on the ground. So the Bulls get a penalty from the scrum, kick it long, and then build some phases, and then Highlanders just turn them over. They were really deadly like that. Pretty dominant in the first half from the Bulls in terms of territory and possession, but I mean it's kind of to be expected. The commentator was driving me a bit nuts by saying they did admit that, yeah, the Highlanders play without the ball. And then he just kept saying that the damn wall is going to break. The damn wall is going to break. They can't keep tackling all day. Yes, they can. That's what the Highlanders do. Like, they always do that. Like, he kept going on about the stats being like 30% possession for the Highlanders and 70% for the Bulls. Like, that means anything. Like, I know in some games that means a lot, but when the Highlanders beat the Blues, they only had 30% of the ball. It's normal. They gave the Blues a bit of a drubbing. When they played the Brumbies, they had 40% of the ball. When they had to play the Stormers, they had 40% of the ball. Like, the Highlanders play without the ball. It doesn't mean anything. You can't read much into those stats. So, sure enough, as soon as he kept saying this damn wall must break, at the start of the second half, the Highlanders put on a bunch of points. They scored a try, and then they got a penalty. So, yeah, the lead changed 4 times in this game, which is kind of what we want. It makes it entertaining. But, you know, after being ahead kind of 14-10 at half-time, it went out 23 points to 14 at one point to the Highlanders. So the damn wall wasn't breaking. The Highlanders were doing what they were doing on the counter-attack, and the Bulls' discipline was probably what was killing it for them, because they had enough dominance in other areas of the game to try and actually exert some pressure, but it wasn't happening. The Bulls managed to kind of shift the momentum back after going down in about the last 15 minutes. And they scored a try pretty late on, about the 74th, 75th minute. Converted it to take the lead, and it was looking like it was going to be kind of a fairy tale finish for the Bulls, but there was just enough time for the Highlanders to get back into this one. Again, the Bulls gave away a kind of dumb offside penalty. Sopwanga kicked it from not an easy spot. So, yeah, they pinched it right at the death. It is a pretty cruel loss if you're a Bulls fan, because you would have thought that they had it won right at the end. But yeah, you got to hope that as this Bulls team gets more experience, that's the kind of mistake they're not going to make next season. Like, they're not that far, you know, off the playoffs this season. But if they can kind of just fine-tune these areas of their game, you got to think next year that they're going to be getting a lot more stuff right. So they do pick up a losing bonus point. Obviously, at home, you'd rather be getting the win. It's 1 point instead of 4. It's pretty heartbreaking, but it would have shaken up the competition a bit more, but not to be. For the Highlanders, you know, they still show that composure, and that's probably maybe an experience thing. Sopwanga is definitely an experienced hand, like Aaron Smith's experienced. Didn't see that much of Ben Smith this night, but I guess he was on the wing. So his mate Fletcher Smith, when he wasn't in the bin, was doing his business for him. And he showed a bit of an experience as well by tackling a guy without the ball to give away a penalty try. Like, it wasn't a guaranteed thing that the guy was, I think it was a Gallant, was going to take the ball and score, but he tackled him without the ball, so he gave the referee no choice for that one. But yes, they showed a bit of composure. They still lack that killer edge which they have at home. When they're away, they don't look quite the same team, and based on the playoff standings at the minute, they're probably going to have to improve that aspect of their game going forward, because they'll likely be playing an away playoff game at some point. So, yeah, still work-ons for them. Definitely good for them to pull out the win, but they won't be entirely happy with that result either. The Highlanders have got the Sharks away. The Bulls have got the Stormers away, so both teams in South Africa are away next week. Yeah, but I think both teams will push those opponents next week based on this performance. It was probably one of the games of the round, this one. Just pretty entertaining all on. Like I said, 4 lead changes. Nothing too intrusive from the TMO, not too many scrum resets. It's, I guess, too many penalties, if nothing else, from the Bulls. But yeah, overall, pretty good round of rugby. Some important results for the conferences overall. And yeah, what did you guys think? Let me know your thoughts in the comments, and I will talk to you guys then soon. See you later.